one other thing about the president. You also raised these questions about his education credentials.
Yeah.
Are you prepared to say today that all these issues should be put to the side and that you accept that Mr. Obama is who he says he is? Or do you still think there are legitimate issues?
Everything's legitimate. You ask me questions that, frankly, nobody gets angry. The press doesn't get angry. Look, the press is very protective of of me, but they're protective of President Obama.
Okay, let's go back to Donald Trump. We lost our signal a second.
The word is, according to what I've read, that he was a terrible student when he went to Occidental. He then gets to Columbia. He then gets to Harvard. I heard at Columbia wasn't a very good student. He then gets to Harvard. How do you get into Harvard if you're not a good student? Now, maybe that's right or maybe it's wrong, but I don't know why he doesn't release his records. Why doesn't he release his Occidental records? Well, I'll tell you why, who cares? Because everyone says he was a great student. Well, if he was, that's great, and if he wasn't, that's great. I was a very good student.
Why don't the diplomas speak for themselves? Why do you continue to hammer away at these issues that deal with integrity?
I'll tell you what, education has always meant a lot to me. And I think education is good. And I think if he wants to release it, that's fine. And if he doesn't want to release it, that's fine, too. But the word is, you'd think he'd want to release it, actually. Because the word is he wasn't a good student, and he ended up getting into Columbia and Harvard. And I'd like to know, well, this is what I read written by some of the people in this room. I'd like to know, how does he get into Harvard? How does he get into Columbia if he isn't a good student? It's an interesting thing. Yes? Well, it's not innuendo. I'm just reporting what I read. Hey, I read stuff that you people write. Hey, look, what's worse innuendo than what I go through? I mean, what people say about me. I mean, I have the ultimate innuendo. But I promise you one thing, nobody will protect me like they protect our president. So, just in finishing, I'm really honored and I'm really proud that I was able to do something that nobody else could do. I'm really happy about it. And now experts will check it and everybody will go over it. And I hope everything's going to be perfect. And by the way, if you remember, from day one, I said, I hope he gives his certificate because I don't want this issue clouding a campaign. Okay.
What do you need to see on the birth certificate to feel like it's a true?
Well, that's not up to me. That's up to experts. I'm sure there's plenty of experts that will look at it.
Why have you given over $1 million in helping to get Democrats elected over the years?
Well, I've had a lot of friends that are Democrats and a lot of friends that are Republicans. And over the years, if you know, New York is a largely Democratic place. It's very rare that you see in New York City, as an example, for a Republican to get elected. The numbers are staggering, where a Democrat will get 94% of the vote, and that's if the Republican is doing a good job. So it's a very, very interesting fact that it happens to be almost all Democratic. Over the years, I've supported many Republicans, many Democrats, and I think there's something nice about that. When I watch Washington and look at Washington, and I see the way they fight, like cats and dogs, just fight like nobody's ever fought before. People that have been in the Senate, that are friends of mine for a long time, they said, we've never seen hatred. You know, they used to be friends. They'd argue, and then they'd go out to dinner together, the Republican and the Democrat, and they'd get things done. Now we're like at a stalemate. I think it would be great if somebody got in there that actually could get along with both sides. And I know many of the people that are on the Democratic side, and in some cases they're friends of mine. I get along with them great. And I think it's time for people to sit down, get together, and get this mess that we're in right now solved. So I view that as an asset, not a liability. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Well, my views change. And you know, when I talk, I do a lot of speaking about success. And I tell people, you have to remain flexible because the world changes. The world will always change. And, you know, you can't just have like an idea and then this idea, it's like go through a wall. Sometimes you have to be able to go under the wall, around the wall, over the wall. So I've always said, have a goal, work hard, but you have to have a certain flexibility. Now, if you look at virtually every candidate that runs for office or currently running for office, They've had views that are much different 10 years ago than they have now. So my views changed, and virtually all of the candidates, their views changed. And that's not, I don't think, a very uncommon thing.
Mr. Trump, are you playing with us, or are we playing with you?
Well, I actually think you're playing with me, but I accept that.
And will you play with us a little more, or is it going to end when you make the announcement that surprises you?
That's a very interesting question. I think you're going to be very surprised.
Ann Coulter said last night you are not running for president. She compared you to Charlie Sheen. She said this is all just a show.
Ann Coulter? Hey, you'll have to see. You know what? We have 3 weeks. Not a big deal. In 3 weeks, you're going to see. I think you're going to be very surprised. And I think if I do run, I'll do very well. And I think, look, I'm already leading the polls and I'm not running. So, am I leading the polls? Thank you.
Republicans, yes, you are.
Well, okay. Well, I mean, excuse me. CNN did a poll. CNN did a poll recently where Obama and I are statistically tied. If you'd like, I could send it to you. Just call up CNN.
How confident are you that you'll beat Obama?
I think I'd beat Obama. If I look at this economy and how bad it's doing, if I look at this economy, it's doing so poorly, and I think ultimately it's going to be largely about that. You look at what he's doing in Libya, which is a total disaster. Nobody even knows what's going on in Libya. You look at what's happening with gasoline prices, where he said he has no control over prices, which he does if he gets on the phone or gets off his basketball court or whatever he's doing at the time. I mean, he should be focused on OPEC and getting those prices down. That's what he should be focused on. Yes. Well, I would have handled Libya much differently. First of all, I don't know who the rebels are, and I've said it many times. The rebels I hear are controlled by Iran and al-Qaeda. So, we make them sound like they're at a Gone with the Wind. It's wonderful, the beautiful rebels. It's so romantic. Isn't it great? You could end up with worse than Gaddafi, perhaps. So I have a real problem having our great military people lose their lives in Libya, and we don't even know what we're getting into. And I've always said, I'd go for Libya, but I want the oil. In the old days, when you win a war, you win a war. Nowadays, you win a war, we lose lives, we spend billions of dollars, and then we come out and we go back home. And we have all of our wounded to take care of. We have all of the dead soldiers and dead military. And what do we get? Nothing. This is interesting, Libya, because the Arab League, which is Saudi Arabia, and many of the wealthiest nations in the world, told us to go in and take out Gaddafi. Now, if they would have said that to me, I would have said $5 billion right now. You know what? Just for the question, they would have given you all of that money. They would have paid it in 2 seconds. The other question I ask is this. We get no oil from Libya. We get no oil. China, which is taking over the world economically because they're smart, meaning their leaders are much smarter. China, taking over the world, gets a big portion of its oil from Libya. They're Libya's biggest customers. Why isn't China involved? Why are we involved with Libya and China's not involved? And China, by the way, the IMF came out 2 days ago. They said by 2016, China's bigger than we are. And you know why they're bigger? Because they're making our products. If they didn't make our products, they wouldn't be at all bigger.
How do you stop U.S. companies sending jobs to China? What would you do?
It's so easy. China is taking unfair advantage of the United States and other countries by a total manipulation of their currency. If they continue to manipulate their currency, if I'm in office and I decide to run and win, within 1 day, they're going to be told, you keep manipulating your currency, we're going to tax you 25%. Now, that's going to do 2 things. First of all, they'll stop manipulating at the mere thought of it if they believed it. But they don't believe this administration because when the president of China comes to the United States, we hold a state dinner for him in the White House. Now, here's a guy that's been screwing our country for years. They're going to make $300 billion profit. Call it profit. This year, $300 billion, more than that. And we hold a state dinner. And the reason is because they manipulate their currency brilliantly. And by the way, I have no anger at China. If you can get away with it, I mean, if I was from China, I'd be very proud of my leaders. But I'm from this country, and I'm proud of this country, but I'm not proud of our leaders because they're allowing the world to take advantage of us. They are allowing the world to rip us off like never before. And by the way, when you talk about budget deficits, the deficits because our economy, how can our economy ever get good? How can our economy ever be strong, ever, when we have other countries making our product? It can't happen.